Your brain treats unearned wealth not as a biological reward, but as a profound neurological threat. When a massive financial windfall suddenly ruptures your established economic reality, the neural networks responsible for survival interpret this rapid shift as a destabilizing crisis. This is not a metaphor, it is a literal neurobiological defense mechanism. To understand why this happens, we must look beyond traditional economic theories and peer directly into the living, firing pathways of your cerebral cortex. You are about to discover the exact physiological mechanism that forces the human mind to self-sabotage sudden prosperity, transforming what should be a lifetime of security into a frantic, unconscious rush to return to baseline scarcity. Let us look at what happens inside the brain when it operates under the long-term pressure of financial scarcity. In a landmark study published in the journal Science by Dr. Anandi Mani and colleagues in 2013, researchers discovered that navigating the daily logistics of poverty imposes a massive, constant cognitive load on the human mind. This mental strain is so severe that it depletes a person's cognitive capacity by the equivalent of 13 IQ points. Think about that. 13 points. This is not a reflection of inherent intelligence, but rather a direct consequence of a brain operating with over-allocated processing power. To visualize this, imagine your brain as a cutting-edge supercomputer. Under normal conditions, this computer has plenty of random access memory to run complex programs, analyze long-term trends, and make deliberate, calculated decisions. But when you introduce chronic financial stress, it is as if a massive, resource-heavy program is constantly running in the background. Every waking second, this background program is consuming processing power to solve immediate survival puzzles. How will the next bill be paid? Which emergency requires immediate attention? How can resources be stretched until the end of the month? This constant state of cognitive triage leaves almost zero memory available for the prefrontal cortex to perform its primary job: executive functioning, impulse control, and long-term projection. The system crashes. When this cognitive overload becomes chronic, the brain undergoes physical, structural adaptations. Neuroimaging studies reveal that prolonged exposure to high-stress environments leads to a reduction in gray matter volume within the prefrontal cortex, the very region responsible for delaying gratification and calculating future consequences. Simultaneously, the amygdala, the brain's emotional smoke detector, becomes enlarged and hyperreactive. This structural shift optimizes the brain for immediate, high-stress survival, but it completely decimates the neural pathways required to manage and sustain long-term abundance. The sugarcane farmers studied by Dr. Mani and colleagues in 2013 showed dramatic differences in cognitive performance before and after their harvest. Before the harvest, when resources were scarce, their brains performed significantly worse on cognitive tests. After the harvest, with funds secured, their cognitive scores soared. Their biology had not changed, their resource-induced cognitive bandwidth had simply been restored. Now, observe what happens when you suddenly inject a massive windfall of cash into this highly adapted, survival-oriented neural system. The brain does not see a solution, it sees a profound systemic mismatch. Because the neural pathways are still physically wired for immediate consumption and threat mitigation, the sudden presence of resource abundance triggers a state of cognitive disorientation. The prefrontal cortex, accustomed to operating under a chronic deficit, is suddenly flooded with decisions it has never been trained to make. This is where the neurobiology of self-sabotage reveals its true face. A groundbreaking study conducted by Dr. Johannes Haushofer in 2016 demonstrated that elevated levels of cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, directly predict a dramatic increase in temporal discounting. Temporal discounting is the scientific term for prioritizing a small, immediate reward over a significantly larger, delayed reward. When your system is saturated with cortisol, your brain is biologically incapable of valuing the future. It demands relief, safety, and dopamine right now. Consider the stark contrast between two distinct neurological states. In the first state, A brain has grown gradually alongside its resources, systematically building the prefrontal pathways necessary to regulate impulse and manage complex financial portfolios. In the second state, a brain is suddenly shifted from a state of chronic scarcity to extreme abundance overnight, like a lottery winner. What happens? The sudden spike in dopamine is so intense that it downregulates the brain's natural receptor sites, leading to an immediate search for even higher levels of stimulation. Without the physical neural infrastructure to regulate this flood, the individual begins making increasingly erratic, high-risk financial decisions. They are not acting irrationally, they are acting in perfect accordance with a brain desperate to return to its familiar neurochemical equilibrium. How many times have you unconsciously sabotaged a financial gain simply because the sudden ease felt unfamiliar or even unsafe? This brings us to the profound psychological concept known as the hedonic treadmill, famously documented in a classic study by Dr. Philip Brickman and his colleagues in 1978. They compared the long-term happiness levels of major lottery winners to those of catastrophic accident victims. The results shook the scientific community. Within one single year of the life-altering event, both groups had returned to almost the exact same baseline of happiness they had experienced before. Why? Because the human brain possesses an incredibly stubborn set point for emotional homeostasis. If you do not actively alter the underlying neural architecture that defines your relationship with safety and self-worth, no amount of external capital will ever make you feel rich. The brain will simply scale its desires, anxieties, and spending to match the new baseline, keeping you perpetually running in place. So, how do we break free from this biological trap? If our brains are wired to protect us by keeping us within our familiar financial comfort zones, we must systematically reprogram these neural pathways. This is not about positive thinking or visualization. It is about deliberate, structured neuroplastic intervention. There are 3 highly specific protocols you can implement immediately to alter how your brain processes wealth. The first protocol is the systematic expansion of your cognitive safety threshold. Because your amygdala interprets sudden, large financial shifts as a threat, you must inoculate your nervous system against this panic response. You can achieve this through a process called incremental exposure. Instead of focusing on a massive, overnight financial leap, which will only trigger defensive mechanisms, focus on consistently expanding your liquid reserves by small, non-threatening increments. For example, commit to keeping a set amount of cash entirely untouched in an account, allowing your brain to adjust to the physical presence of surplus without immediately seeking to spend it. By slowly raising this financial baseline over several months, you allow your prefrontal cortex to build the structural pathways necessary to view surplus as safe, rather than an emergency that must be solved. Wealth is not an accumulation of currency, it is a state of nervous system regulation. The second protocol is the implementation of pre-commitment neurocontracts. When your prefrontal cortex is exhausted or overwhelmed, it defaults to immediate gratification pathways controlled by the basal ganglia. To prevent this, you must bypass active decision-making entirely during high-stress moments. Set up automated systems that redirect a portion of any incoming resource, whether a salary increase, a bonus, or a windfall, directly into long-term, low-friction holding assets before your brain even has the opportunity to register its presence. By removing the active choice to save or invest, you neutralize the cortisol-driven temporal discounting that leads to self-sabotage. You are effectively making decisions for your future self while your prefrontal cortex is still operating at its peak cognitive capacity. Think about the last time you made a poor financial choice when you were exhausted, and ask yourself if that choice was made by you or by an depleted prefrontal cortex. The third protocol is the deliberate reduction of cognitive load through extreme simplification. Since we know from the research of Manny and colleagues that financial stress acts as a massive drain on your mental processing power, you must actively free up cognitive bandwidth elsewhere in your life. Reduce the number of trivial decisions you make daily, simplify your routine, automate your basic lifestyle logistics, and eliminate low-value inputs that clutter your attention. By intentionally clearing this mental space, you restore the raw cognitive processing power your prefrontal cortex needs to evaluate complex financial opportunities, resist impulsive spending, and break the scarcity-driven survival loop once and for all. When you begin to view financial behavior through this neurobiological lens, your entire perspective on human struggle undergoes a profound evolution. You stop viewing your past financial mistakes as moral failures, as laziness, or as a lack of willpower. You realize that you were simply operating with a nervous system that was doing exactly what it was designed to do: survive a perceived threat. You look at those around you who seem trapped in a perpetual cycle of scarcity and self-sabotage with a deep, scientific empathy. It is not that they do not want to succeed, it is that their brains are locked in a high cortisol survival loop that makes long-term thinking physically impossible. By understanding this science, you are no longer a passive passenger to these evolutionary defaults. You have the power to consciously remodel your neural pathways, to slowly and systematically teach your brain that safety does not mean returning to zero, and that true prosperity is something your biology can learn to welcome, sustain, and protect. The journey into the human mind does not end with understanding how we protect ourselves from wealth. Indeed, the neural mechanisms we have uncovered today are merely the surface of a much deeper, far more counterintuitive biological reality. Subscribe now and prepare your mind for our next investigation, where we will expose a hidden biological paradox that governs your every daily social interaction, one that is quietly dictating your status, your influence, and your survival without you ever realizing it. Keep exploring the mechanisms of your mind and let science decode who you are.